Ace. H.
So Whitebeard versus Akainu. This fight is the most divisive fight in the One Piece community, probably still to this day. And it is also one of the most misrepresented fights I've seen ever spoken about. So I'm going to break it all down here, but this fight isn't actually close. Now, the first thing I want to just go over is that there's this notion that like Whitebeard is holding back this immense level of power that like the admirals aren't. Like Whitebeard just went easy. When the first thing Whitebeard does when he shows up is he fucking unloads a tsunami in both directions on Marineford. Now Aokiji just freezes it. He then jumps off his fucking ship like a damn banshee and literally like rips through the entire scaffolding. He literally sent a shockwave to the execution platform. The admirals block it. He's casually just running around recklessly whipping around Gura attacks that are just slamming into the building, slamming into the concrete. Of course he's not trying to kill his crew, and of course I don't think he fucking went all out per se in terms of the absolute pinnacle of what he could destructively do if he just said fuck it, I'm crashing out. But it is absolutely absurd to believe that the admirals were not holding back the same amount, if not significantly more, based on their circumstance, especially when you've seen Aokiji freeze fucking 3 island distance of fucking ice in an ocean to make a new ice continent. You fucking see a whole island terraformed and turned to a fucking different place with new climates. And it's just like, what, are they gonna just allow fucking Whitebeard to sit there and charge up anyway? Like, what do you guys think he's gonna be capable of doing that he's not doing? For him to destroy the world or whatever, even if you take that hyper literally, he'd have to fucking sit there for a minute and do it like manually. Like, what the fuck? Then you also have a situation where he's stated to be able to channel his full power through his Basento anyway. So if he's going to condense down attacks to where they don't have so much AoE, but they just rely on AP, he can fucking channel his power through his Basento. So, I mean, when you put it in that kind of context, it's like, okay, I'm just saying, like, you guys gotta open your eyes to this shit. But then you literally see him tilt the seas the same way Blackbeard did, but on a higher capacity. Like, he started ripping down fucking the skies. Like, he was fucking going crazy, like, legitimately. He split the island at a point when he went berserk. That's what you see. You only see Akainu do any kind of AoE splash attack when he's shooting at the water that was frozen. They got trapped in the middle of Marineford where there wasn't like any problems. That's where you see the meteor volcano, great eruption, all these different things where he destroys an iceberg. He sent the meteor shower down onto the sea and the ice, and it's like real casual shit he did, all from like staying on the scaffolding, because he says we gotta stay on the platform to protect it. This, people don't realize that this whole fucking event was a planned event with a timeline. Like, there was a schedule to the execution. They were broadcasting this shit. So that's why they don't kill Ace right away. That's why they wait until they get the order. If you had reading comprehension going through it, you'll understand that Sengoku's the one giving orders to every single admiral basically before they do anything throughout the entire war. He instructed Aokiji to destroy the broadcast. He instructed Akainu to start attacking. He told Aokiji to start the onslaught. Kizaru asked for permission multiple times. You have all these instances where it's like Sengoku's the spearhead. It's even implied that Sengoku's the one that came up with the tactic about having Squad stab Whitebeard, and Akainu just followed through with the plan. So with that shit said, it's like, cut that shit right out. So this fight basically starts in chapter 567, and this is after Whitebeard just had a brief scuffle with Aokiji. Now, one thing I want to make note of is that Whitebeard is holding back significantly less than Akainu. He's being far more reckless than any of the admirals. And it's stated by Sengoku about how Marineford is the monument. Obviously, the admirals can't go all out here. It should be apparent based on what Punk Hazard looks like compared to what Marineford looks like. Apparent based on the dialogue as well. But what you see is that Akainu just like walks over to Whitebeard, who is again just recklessly destroying shit, and he literally blocks his Basento with his foot. Now, if this doesn't convey the scope of this fight, I don't know what to tell you. Like, if this was on the other foot, imagine what the other side would say to this. And it's just like, when somebody just simply blocks your attack with their foot casually with their hands in their pockets, I don't know any other way to interpret this other than like, yeah, you got no shot, pal. Regardless, you know, we're going to go through with it. Akainu says this island won't last long if we turn you loose. Exactly what I'm talking about. And Whitebeard, again, doubles down by saying, ha, try and protect the island then. Right? So using the advantage that he has in terms of he doesn't give a fuck about being reckless. He doesn't have to protect the sanctity of Marineford. He's now saying try to protect the island. At this point, Akainu loads up a magma fist and Whitebeard clashes even with it. So he's able to react to the attack. Nice for Whitebeard, right? They continue on, and then you see that Marco is trying to make a move toward Ace. Garp comes down, punches him, and it looks as if Whitebeard looks up at Garp. He says Garp, and then he talks about how he's just an old feeble soldier now, like teasing Garp and shit, talking shit, and he's distracted by this momentarily. At that point, Akainu issues out a Lava Hound, which Whitebeard does react to. So this kind of dispels the notion of Whitebeard's observation haki in combat being any lesser. Obviously, like, you have the statements from Crocodile and Marco where they're talking about he should have been able to react to Squard, right? Should have been able to do this. Problem with that is, unless you think Squard is faster than fucking Akainu, in combat, it's not something that matters. He reacts to this Lava Hound an inch away from his face. It's like the same, if not less distance that Squard was when he turned on. The Squard thing was much more surprising, obviously. Obviously, he understands that Akainu's still in front of him, so he's somewhat paying attention. It's not completely the same deal, but it just shows that his reaction time is still there, and when he's applying himself and applying his observation, applying his battle IQ, this shit isn't an issue. So it's not like he's just this crazy decrepit, he's slow. You can even see when Squard initially pops up on the ship, Whitebeard notices him with his observation haki to start. He clearly just like dropped his guard completely. Now, whatever you want to say, like Marco's basing that on, again, it's not really gonna matter because we see him in combat reacting to things that are much faster than Squard. So he reacts to this and purposefully deflects Akainu's Lava Hound into more buildings. So again, further reinforcing the recklessness I talked about earlier. And again, we get another reference to this where Akainu says, do you have to demolish the town every single time? And Whitebeard again antagonizes him and says, I told you to defend it, didn't I? I think that's pretty clear to understand the logistics, where it's like Akainu is clearly concerned about the damage to the town part of Marineford, is clearly concerned about widespread AoE style attacks or high destructive capability attacks, and Whitebeard clearly isn't, at least to the level that Akainu is. With that said, we basically see that Akainu, after this brief interaction, Whitebeard has his first heart attack, and all that happens is Akainu simply walks up to him and literally rips a hole into his chest. Now, the point I make about this is that what is stopping Akainu from just finishing the job here? He just literally turns away from Whitebeard and walks away. He just walks away from him, like literally. It's highlighted the entire war that Akainu didn't feel that Whitebeard was on his level and that he wasn't even worth killing. He went and put the hole in his chest and was like, yeah, he's fucking done. You could call that overconfidence from Akainu. You could call that just some stupidity, because I think he would regret this if we were to ask him about it, because he could have just finished him right there. But instead he walks away and says, yeah, I'm just gonna let the fodder handle this, and all the fodder jump in and attack him, right? Now, Whitebeard had a better showing against Akainu there than he did with Aokiji. Aokiji clearly got the speed advantage on him, but you know, Akainu was very lax, and there was only like one brief interaction. Whitebeard reacted to a few attacks, didn't land anything of his own. So we see on guard, he has no like he didn't have anything in his bag to touch Aokiji or Akainu. And both those interactions take place before the heart attack, before the severe declination starts to occur after the heart attack takes place. With that said, you then, you know, have all these fodder attacking Whitebeard. You have Kizaru having a brief interaction with Whitebeard where he also embarrassed like all three of the admirals. To be honest, you know, Whitebeard's not really a threat to any of them. Obviously Kizaru fights a lesser version, but the same shit would have happened. Kizaru stayed fast and Akainu and Aokiji anyway. There's no chance Whitebeard had to touch him. And then he just kind of overpowers his Basento too, which is really crazy. Like, Whitebeard's like has his Basento stuck to the ground with Kizaru standing on it. Really disrespectful when you really look at it. Now, I talk about Whitebeard being diminished at that point. It's also very possible, and this is just a theory at this point, but it's one rooted with a lot of evidence. Whitebeard seems to be a Buccaneer. He is a Buccaneer. There's something going on where they have this special ability to endure in the face of great peril in situations that should be impossible to fight for their family. And essentially that seems to me what happens really throughout all Marineford, but really emphasized when Ace dies. As you saw with Kuma, he was supposed to self-destruct or be in a vegetative state, and he was able to run to Bonnie and protect Bonnie despite all odds, despite it being something that completely defies logic and science. Here, I think that it's a situation where, yeah, Whitebeard should be just declining at the point of Ace's death further and have no chance to do anything. But instead, I think it's adrenaline, obviously, but I think that that Buccaneer blood probably amps him up again to where he can just start fighting on fumes. Things like he's fighting like a zombie at that point. So that's what happens there. If you don't want to take the Buccaneer thing, you don't have to. I think he's bloodlusted anyway, and regardless, we already saw what happens when he was fresher at the beginning of the war. He couldn't land a hit. When we get to the point where he lands a punch on Akainu finally, it's the clearest example of an off guard you can ever see. Akainu's entire mission, this entire war, was simple. It was to kill Ace, but then it evolved into killing Luffy, so that's all he cared about. He killed Ace, and then he was going after Luffy. He got stopped by Marco. He's focused on Marco getting in the way of Luffy. He's in hot pursuit doing something else. He's not even thinking about Whitebeard at all. And Whitebeard comes in with a giant Gura Duraneg punch. Looks to be using a mission as well because the punch isn't even making contact with them. And we've seen that Whitebeard usually makes contact. Whether he's using it or not, whatever. Who knows what hockey's being used pre-time skip. Because it's just not animated. But we did see that Whitebeard had the capacity to use advanced conquerors in his old age against Shanks. Yes, he wasn't able to use it after the heart attack. Before the heart attack, I don't see there's any reason to believe he couldn't. And after this bloodlusted, reinvigorated will moment, I also don't necessarily think that it'd be out of the realm of possibility for him to be using it. It doesn't really matter. Like I said, we don't have any way of knowing or proving it. But he lands this giant punch from the Gura anyway, which is stated to be one of the 2 strongest devil fruits. And Akainu like takes heavy damage, obviously, but essentially eats it, gets right back up, and rips off half Whitebeard's face. Now, a lot of anime onlys will be surprised because in the anime they only make it look like he took off half his mustache. So stupid. They added a bunch of filler scenes that make Akainu look terrible when that was never the impression you were supposed to get. I talked about this in my last video, but the anime is never to be taken as canon when they deviate. Oda has very little to any involvement anymore. 7 different directors run the show over there, and essentially it's a situation where you always go to the primary source, and in the primary source we literally get a linear view of what exactly happened. Punches Akainu, Akainu gets up, rips off half his face, and then as he's still going through with the punch, following through, you can see this very clearly that his arm is still magnified, punching through him. He's also airborne. Whitebeard endures the punch and uncorks his own island-splitting attack that lands on Akainu here. This is like a relative encounter after the off guard. They both just trade punches here where, you know, Akainu falls into the island split. And Akainu is never unconscious. He literally says the equivalent of like F you as he falls, and he just goes into trouble. Now, some people think that like, well, this is fraudulent behavior because why did Akainu not just come right back up? For one, he does have some kind of propulsion technique. It's not like high-level flight. He can propel himself. We've seen this when he was in pursuit of Jinbei. I'm not really sure if that can like just go on infinitely or if like he needs to like jump into it. Regardless, it's like when he's falling here, he's completely turned around falling and there's no footing to like go off of. And then you have a situation where he just did take heavy damage. Like he was damaged. He took one huge off-guard punch and then took another one. This is like the equivalent to saying like when Marco got punched by Garp. Why doesn't Marco just immediately fly back up? Like, he took the punch and then he sits on the ground for a second and then gets back up and keeps on going. Akainu gets hit by the punch and then there's no ground to fall into, just falls into the hole and then just tunnels through the ground and comes up somewhere else. He didn't care about Whitebeard anyway. He'd already made that very clear. He understands that you can see Whitebeard's brain popping out of his head at this point. He's already on fumes. The guy is dead. Blackbeard gets the official kill, but Akainu's the one that really ended things. There's no point there. And you see that Akainu, during this period where people think he's down for a whole period of time, literally circled the entire island to come up on the other side in pursuit of Luffy, makes no more mention of Whitebeard and just continues on with what his mission was, to kill Luffy. And then he gets confronted by all Whitebeard's commanders after taking this damage from Whitebeard, minus Jozu, who was like just taken out by Aokiji, but everybody else is there, plus Crocodile, plus Ivankov, and literally just runs through all these people. And that's where you get the Kobe moment. He's literally stayed to be fighting all the commanders by himself, and he's on his way to finishing what he started, and Kobe jumps in the way, and then that's when you have Shanks show up. So that's what happened. So even after taking all that damage, Akainu was never beaten, even by the off-guard attacks. He comes back up and decides to go after Whitebeard instead of circling the island. Whitebeard has no more chance of fighting. Like, he uncorked a few more attacks against Blackbeard, but there was nothing more that really needed to be inflicted on him to die. Like, he just got hit by what everybody jumped in with their guns and shit. And the rest of the Blackbeard pirates are essentially fodder at this point in the story anyway. Akainu was clear of Whitebeard the whole war. The interaction doesn't change it. I'm gonna be generous and give Whitebeard in this state a mid-diff. Like, he can push Akainu mid-diff because he has shown some high-level endurance. If he has the Buccaneer blood, especially in the circumstances, he can endure for a while. He definitely has the AP if he can land, if he gets an opportunity, which he got that one valid punch after Akainu's punching his. But again, Akainu's kind of compromised because he's airborne and punching through Whitebeard at the same time, so they just traded. I think Whitebeard can push it mid-diff, but like, that's really the extent. Like, Akainu's got the endurance to fight for 10 days against somebody that's on his level, where they take heavy amounts of damage each. He basically walked off Whitebeard's attacks and slaughtered all these commander tier opponents afterwards. And we already saw what happens when they're on guard. It's just a point where if Whitebeard never gets the opportunity to hit him off guard, I don't think he lands anything. Unless it's a situation where, like, he takes one to give one. But that was also Akainu just getting it back on Whitebeard. Like, I'm going to get this back. So he goes in careless anyway. But it was more effective than Whitebeard's hit anyway. Him taking off half his face, like, that's a killing blow. Like, you don't return from that. Whitebeard was in his, like, adrenaline moment. And he was clearly dying anyway. But he's dead effectively as soon as that punch lands. Yeah, this is a mid-diff at worst. I think all the admirals there would mid-diff Whitebeard. So yeah, hope this helps, and stop downplaying Akainu. Whitebeard is also still the strongest pirate at this point. Obviously, I don't think that equates to him beating Kaido, Shanks, or even Big Mom at that point necessarily, because of the declination that'll occur when he has a heart attack. I think that his stamina is fucked. But at the beginning of the fight, when he's still the strongest, before declination occurs, he would still be the strongest. Akainu is my top one in the verse though, so take that as you will. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace, because don't forget, Akainu gets a lot stronger after this and then after fighting Aokiji as well.